Question 1. Comparative studies suggest that property managers in Dubai play a crucial role in advising property owners on financial matters. Considering the loan underwriting and approval process for a significant property improvement project, which of the following approaches best reflects the professional responsibilities and regulatory expectations for a property manager in Dubai? Option A. Prioritize securing the loan quickly to facilitate the improvement project, focusing primarily on the projected increase in property value rather than a detailed analysis of the property's current financial stability or the owner's ability to manage the debt. Option B. Accept the loan proposal as presented by the lender, assuming the lender has conducted all necessary due diligence, and advise the owner to proceed based on the lender's recommendation. Option C. Recommend the loan based on the owner's expressed desire for the improvement and the lender's assurance that the loan terms are competitive, without extensive independent verification of the property's financial health or the owner's repayment capability. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the property's current financial performance, including income, expenses, and occupancy rates, and assess the owner's overall financial capacity to service the proposed loan, presenting a detailed report with a balanced assessment of risks and benefits to the owner for their informed decision. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the property's current financial performance, including income, expenses, and occupancy rates, and assess the owner's overall financial capacity to service the proposed loan, presenting a detailed report with a balanced assessment of risks and benefits to the owner for their informed decision. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the property owner's immediate financial needs with the long-term financial health of the property and the lender's risk exposure. Property managers in the UAE operate under specific regulations that govern their fiduciary duties and the prudent management of client assets. The loan underwriting and approval process, particularly when involving a property manager's recommendation or involvement, demands adherence to principles of due diligence, transparency, and acting in the best interest of the principal, the property owner. Misjudging the loan's viability or the owner's capacity can lead to significant financial repercussions for the owner and potential liability for the property manager. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented assessment of the property's financial standing and the owner's repayment capacity, aligning with the principles of sound financial management and the fiduciary duty owed to the property owner. This includes a comprehensive review of the property's income and expenses, market comparables, and the owner's overall financial situation. The property manager must then present a well-reasoned recommendation to the owner, highlighting both the benefits and risks associated with the loan. This aligns with the UAE's emphasis on transparency and responsible financial advice within the real estate sector, ensuring that decisions are informed and protect the owner's interests. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize the owner's immediate desire for the loan without adequately assessing the risks. This could manifest as overlooking significant operational deficits in the property's financial statements or failing to scrutinize the owner's ability to service the debt, especially if the loan is intended for non-essential improvements or personal use rather than income-generating enhancements. Such an oversight would breach the property manager's duty of care and potentially violate regulations that mandate prudent financial advice and risk mitigation for clients. Another incorrect approach involves accepting a loan offer based solely on the lender's assurances without independent verification. Property managers have a responsibility to conduct their own due diligence, which includes verifying the terms of the loan, the lender's reputation, and the reasonableness of the interest rates and repayment schedules in the current market. Relying solely on the lender's presentation, without cross-referencing information or seeking independent expert opinions where necessary, exposes the owner to potentially unfavorable terms and increased financial risk. This failure to exercise independent judgment and due diligence is a significant ethical and professional lapse. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to proceed with a loan recommendation without obtaining explicit, informed consent from the property owner after presenting a balanced view of the risks and benefits. The property manager's role is advisory and facilitative, not decision-making. The ultimate decision rests with the owner. Failing to ensure the owner fully understands the implications of the loan and has provided clear authorization based on comprehensive information is a failure of communication and a disregard for the owner's autonomy. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the client's objectives, followed by a rigorous assessment of the financial implications and risks. This involves gathering all relevant data, performing due diligence, consulting with relevant experts if necessary, and then presenting a clear, objective analysis to the client. The framework should emphasize transparency, informed consent, and acting always in the best interest of the client, in accordance with the regulatory expectations in the UAE for property management professionals. Question 2. The investigation demonstrates that a property manager in Dubai has drafted a lease agreement for a commercial property. The agreement identifies the landlord and tenant by name and includes a clause for the monthly rent. However, the description of the property is limited to the building name and floor number, without specifying the exact unit number or its boundaries. Additionally, the contract does not explicitly state the intended use of the commercial space, and the rent payment schedule is described as to be agreed upon quarterly. Considering the regulatory framework governing real estate relationships in Dubai, which of the following actions represents the most prudent and legally sound approach to ensure the enforceability of this lease agreement? Option A. Advise the landlord and tenant to proceed with the current lease agreement and rely on general principles of commercial practice to resolve any ambiguities regarding the property description, rent, and usage. Option B. Proceed with the current lease agreement as is, assuming that the building name and floor number are sufficient for property identification and that the parties will informally agree on the rent and usage details later. Option C. Amend the lease agreement to include a precise description of the leased unit, including its boundaries and any appurtenant rights, clearly define the permitted use of the commercial space, and establish a specific quarterly rent payment schedule, followed by mandatory registration of the amended agreement with the Dubai Land Department via Ijari. Option D. Immediately register the current lease agreement with the Dubai Land Department via Ijari, believing that the registration process itself will validate any deficiencies in the contract's terms. The correct answer is C. Amend the lease agreement to include a precise description of the leased unit, including its boundaries and any appurtenant rights, clearly define the permitted use of the commercial space, and establish a specific quarterly rent payment schedule, followed by mandatory registration of the amended agreement with the Dubai Land Department via Ijari. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential for a contract to be deemed unenforceable, leading to significant financial and legal repercussions for both the landlord and the tenant. The core issue revolves around the validity of the lease agreement under UAE law, specifically concerning the essential elements required for a legally binding real estate contract. Careful judgment is required to ensure all contractual terms align with the Federal Decree Law No. 50 of 2022 on the regulation of real estate relationships in the Emirate of Dubai, the Real Estate Relations Law, and its implementing regulations, as well as general principles of contract law in the UAE. The best professional approach involves meticulously reviewing the lease agreement to confirm the presence of all legally mandated elements for enforceability under Dubai's real estate regulations. This includes clearly defined parties, landlord and tenant, a precise description of the leased property, the agreed-upon rent amount and payment schedule, and the duration of the lease. Furthermore, it requires ensuring that the contract explicitly states the purpose of the lease and that both parties have provided their informed consent without duress or misrepresentation. Adherence to the registration requirements with the Dubai Land Department, DLD, through the Ijari system is also paramount for enforceability. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the foundational legal requirements for a valid and enforceable lease agreement in Dubai, minimizing the risk of disputes and legal challenges. It prioritizes compliance with the specific provisions of the Real Estate Relations Law and general UAE contract law principles, ensuring the contract is robust and legally sound. An approach that overlooks the precise identification of the leased property, perhaps by using a vague description or referencing an outdated property registry number, is professionally unacceptable. This failure directly contravenes the requirement for certainty in contractual terms, making the contract susceptible to challenges regarding its subject matter. Similarly, an approach that does not clearly stipulate the rent amount or the method of payment, or that leaves these terms open to future negotiation, violates fundamental contract law principles and the specific mandates of the Real Estate Relations Law, which require clear and unambiguous terms for enforceability. Another professionally unacceptable approach would be to neglect the mandatory registration of the lease agreement with the DLD via Ijari. This omission renders the contract unenforceable against third parties and can lead to significant legal complications, as registration is a statutory requirement for the validity and enforcement of real estate leases in Dubai. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes thorough due diligence and strict adherence to the governing legal framework. This involves a systematic review of all proposed contractual terms against the requirements of the UAE Federal Decree Law No. 50 of 2022 and its implementing regulations, as well as relevant Dubai RERA guidelines. Before finalizing any agreement, professionals must ensure that all essential elements of a contract are present, clearly defined, and legally compliant. They should also confirm that all necessary registration procedures are completed promptly and accurately. In situations of ambiguity or potential noncompliance, seeking legal counsel specializing in UAE real estate law is a critical step in mitigating risks and ensuring enforceability. Question 3. Assessment of a property manager's response to an owner's request in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, to only show a vacant apartment to tenants of a specific nationality, considering the UAE's fair housing laws and anti-discrimination regulations. Option A. Subtly suggest to the owner that certain nationalities are typically a better fit for the property's location and amenities, without explicitly mentioning the owner's request. Option B. Agree to the owner's request and only present applications from the specified nationality to the owner. Option C. Politely inform the owner that the request cannot be fulfilled as it violates UAE anti-discrimination laws and that all prospective tenants will be treated equally. Option D. Advise the owner that while discrimination is illegal, the property manager will prioritize showing the property to individuals of the preferred nationality first. Correct answer is C. Politely inform the owner that the request cannot be fulfilled as it violates UAE anti-discrimination laws and that all prospective tenants will be treated equally. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common yet sensitive challenge for property managers in the UAE, specifically Dubai, where ensuring fair access to housing is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the owner's stated preferences with the stringent anti-discrimination laws. A property manager must navigate potential implicit biases or direct discriminatory requests from owners while upholding their professional and legal obligations. Misinterpreting or ignoring these obligations can lead to severe legal repercussions, reputational damage, and a breach of trust with both owners and prospective tenants. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves politely but firmly informing the owner that the request cannot be accommodated due to the UAE's Federal Decree Law No. 27 of 2020 concerning the prohibition of discrimination and hatred, and the Dubai Land Department's DLD commitment to fair housing practices. This approach directly addresses the owner's request by explaining its illegality and ethical unacceptability under UAE law. It prioritizes compliance with anti-discrimination regulations, safeguarding the property manager from legal liability, and reinforcing their commitment to ethical conduct. This proactive stance educates the owner and sets clear boundaries for future interactions, ensuring all potential tenants are treated equitably regardless of their background. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves attempting to subtly steer the prospective tenant away from the property without explicitly stating the reason. This is problematic because it fails to directly address the discriminatory nature of the owner's request and may still result in a discriminatory outcome. It also misses an opportunity to educate the owner about their legal obligations, potentially leading to future discriminatory requests. Furthermore, it can be perceived as dishonest or evasive, damaging the property manager's professional reputation. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the owner's request, implying that the property manager will only show the property to individuals matching the owner's specified criteria. This is a direct violation of UAE anti-discrimination laws. Property managers have a legal and ethical duty to present all qualified prospective tenants fairly and without prejudice. Facilitating discrimination, even at the owner's behest, makes the property manager complicit in illegal activity and exposes them to significant penalties. A third incorrect approach is to inform the owner that while discrimination is illegal, the property manager will still prioritize showing the property to individuals who fit the owner's preference, hoping they will be the first to apply. This approach is flawed because it acknowledges the illegality, but then attempts to circumvent it through a loophole. The act of prioritizing based on discriminatory criteria, even if not explicitly refusing other applicants, still constitutes a form of discrimination and undermines the principle of equal opportunity in housing. It suggests a willingness to bend ethical and legal rules, which is professionally unacceptable. Professional reasoning. Property managers in Dubai must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical conduct. When faced with a request that potentially violates anti-discrimination laws, the first step is to identify the specific UAE legislation and DLD guidelines that are relevant. The next step is to communicate clearly and professionally with the owner, explaining the legal and ethical boundaries. If the owner persists, the property manager must be prepared to refuse to act on the discriminatory request, even if it means losing a client. Maintaining integrity and upholding fair housing principles should always take precedence over short-term gains or avoiding difficult conversations. Question 4. The monitoring system demonstrates a sustained decline in property transaction volumes and average property values in the Dubai real estate market over the last 6 months. As a property manager, how should you advise your clients, property owners, on navigating this economic downturn? Option A. Focus solely on optimizing operational efficiencies within the properties, disregarding the broader economic impact on asset value and rental income. Option B. Proactively engage with property owners to discuss the prevailing market conditions, present data-driven insights into the downturn, explain contributing economic factors, and collaboratively develop revised asset management strategies. Option C. Advise all property owners to immediately list their properties at significantly reduced prices to liquidate assets quickly. Option D. Continue with standard marketing and leasing strategies, assuming the market will self-correct without informing owners of the current economic realities. The correct answer is B. Proactively engage with property owners to discuss the prevailing market conditions, present data-driven insights into the downturn, explain contributing economic factors, and collaboratively develop revised asset management strategies. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a significant downturn in the Dubai real estate market, evidenced by a sustained decrease in property transaction volumes and a noticeable decline in average property values over the past 2 quarters. This scenario is professionally challenging for a property manager because it directly impacts their ability to achieve client objectives, such as maximizing rental yields or achieving capital appreciation on behalf of property owners. It requires a nuanced understanding of economic indicators and their implications for property management strategies, moving beyond routine operational tasks to strategic advisory. Careful judgment is required to balance the immediate financial pressures on owners with long-term asset preservation and value enhancement. The best approach involves proactively engaging with property owners to discuss the prevailing market conditions and their potential impact on their investments. This includes presenting data-driven insights into the market downturn, explaining the underlying economic factors contributing to it, e.g., global economic slowdown, changes in investor sentiment, increased supply, and collaboratively developing revised strategies. These strategies might include adjusting rental pricing expectations, exploring new tenant acquisition channels, focusing on property maintenance to retain existing tenants, or advising on potential short-term holding strategies versus distressed sales. This approach is correct because it aligns with the property manager's fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of their clients, providing informed advice based on market realities and regulatory expectation for transparency and diligence in the UAE. It fosters trust and allows for informed decision-making by property owners. An incorrect approach would be to continue with standard marketing and leasing strategies without acknowledging the market shift. This fails to inform owners of the changing economic landscape and its potential consequences, potentially leading to prolonged vacancies or below-market rental rates, thereby not acting in the owner's best interest. Another incorrect approach is to advise owners to immediately list their properties at significantly reduced prices without a thorough analysis of the market's bottom or alternative value preservation strategies. This could lead to unnecessary capital loss for the owner. Finally, ignoring the market downturn and focusing solely on operational efficiency without addressing the economic impact on asset value and rental income would be professionally negligent, as it neglects a core responsibility of property management in a fluctuating market. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with continuous market monitoring and analysis. Upon identifying significant market shifts, the next step is to communicate these findings transparently and promptly to clients, supported by evidence. This communication should be followed by a collaborative discussion to assess the impact on individual properties and to formulate tailored strategies. This process emphasizes proactive communication, data-informed advice, and client partnership, ensuring that property management services remain relevant and valuable even in challenging economic conditions. Question 5. Regulatory review indicates that a property manager in Dubai, UAE, is tasked with overseeing a mixed-use development that includes residential apartments, retail shops, and a small warehousing facility. What is the most appropriate approach to ensure compliance with the relevant real estate regulations? Option A. Apply a uniform set of management practices across all components, assuming that the mixed-use nature simplifies regulatory oversight. Option B. Differentiate management strategies and legal adherence based on the specific RERA classification of each component, residential, commercial, industrial within the development. Option C. Focus management efforts primarily on the residential units, as they typically represent the largest portion of income and tenant volume. Option D. Manage all components under commercial real estate regulations, as the presence of retail and warehousing indicates a predominantly commercial operation. The correct answer is B. Differentiate management strategies and legal adherence based on the specific RERA classification of each component, residential, commercial, industrial within the development. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a property manager in Dubai, UAE, due to the diverse nature of real estate and the specific regulations governing each type. Misclassifying a property can lead to significant legal and financial repercussions, including fines, contract disputes, and reputational damage. The property manager must demonstrate a thorough understanding of the Dubai Real Estate Regulatory Agency, RERA, classifications, and their associated management requirements. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with the specific laws applicable to each property type. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a meticulous review of the property's intended use and physical characteristics against the definitions provided by RERA for residential, commercial, industrial, and agricultural properties. This approach ensures that the management strategy, marketing efforts, and legal documentation align precisely with the property's classification. For instance, a property designated for office spaces would be managed under commercial real estate regulations, requiring adherence to specific leasing laws, tenant rights, and landlord obligations distinct from those for a residential apartment building or an industrial warehouse. This precise alignment with RERA framework is paramount for legal compliance and effective property management. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that all properties with a physical structure are managed under a single set of rules, failing to differentiate between residential, commercial, industrial, or agricultural uses. This oversight ignores the distinct legal frameworks, zoning laws, and tenant protections mandated by RERA for each category. For example, managing an industrial facility with the same protocols as a residential villa would violate specific safety regulations, environmental standards, and commercial leasing practices. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the property's current occupancy without verifying its official classification and permitted use. A property might be temporarily used for a purpose different from its registered classification. For instance, a commercial unit being used for storage without proper permits or classification changes would expose the property manager to regulatory penalties. The manager must always refer to the official title deeds and RERA classifications. A further incorrect approach is to apply management practices based on common industry standards from other regions without confirming their applicability under UAE law. While general property management principles may be similar, specific regulations in Dubai, such as those concerning service charges, tenancy contracts, ijari, and dispute resolution, are unique and must be strictly followed. Professional reasoning. Property managers in Dubai should adopt a systematic approach. First, they must obtain and thoroughly review the official property documentation, including title deeds and RERA classifications. Second, they should consult RERA guidelines and relevant Dubai laws to understand the specific requirements for each property type. Third, they must develop management plans tailored to the identified property classification, ensuring all actions comply with legal and ethical standards. Continuous professional development and staying updated on RERA amendments are crucial for maintaining compliance and providing effective service. Question 6. Consider a scenario where a tenant in Dubai wishes to undertake significant structural alterations to a commercial property they are leasing. As the property manager, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with UAE real estate law and the lease agreement? Option A. Advise the tenant to proceed with the alterations based on a verbal understanding with the landlord, as formal written consent is not always necessary. Option B. Refuse the tenant's request outright without investigating the lease terms or discussing the matter with the landlord. Option C. Immediately grant the tenant permission to proceed with the alterations, assuming it will improve the property, without consulting the landlord or reviewing the lease. Option D. Review the lease agreement for clauses on property alterations, communicate the tenant's request with detailed plans to the landlord for formal approval, and document all correspondence and approvals. The correct answer is D. Review the lease agreement for clauses on property alterations, communicate the tenant's request with detailed plans to the landlord for formal approval, and document all correspondence and approvals. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a potential conflict between a tenant's desire to modify a leased property and the landlord's rights and responsibilities under UAE real estate law, specifically concerning structural alterations. Property managers must navigate this situation by balancing the tenant's needs with legal obligations and the preservation of the property's value, requiring a thorough understanding of the governing lease agreement and relevant UAE Federal Law No. 5 of 1985 concerning civil transactions, as amended, and its related decrees, particularly those pertaining to real property and tenancy. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough review of the existing lease agreement to ascertain the clauses related to property modifications. If the lease is silent or permits alterations with landlord consent, the property manager should then formally communicate with the landlord, presenting the tenant's request along with detailed plans for the proposed alterations. This approach is correct because it adheres strictly to the contractual obligations outlined in the lease and respects the landlord's ultimate ownership and decision-making authority as stipulated by UAE property law. It ensures that any modifications are undertaken with full transparency and documented approval, thereby mitigating legal risks and potential disputes. This process aligns with the principles of good faith and due diligence expected of property managers under UAE regulations. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to grant the tenant permission to proceed with the alterations without consulting the landlord or reviewing the lease agreement. This is a significant regulatory failure, as it bypasses the landlord's rights and potentially violates lease terms, exposing both the property manager and the landlord to legal liabilities under UAE tenancy laws. Another incorrect approach is to immediately refuse the tenant's request without any investigation or communication with the landlord. This demonstrates a lack of professional diligence and could lead to a breach of the landlord's duty to consider reasonable tenant requests, potentially creating an adversarial relationship and overlooking opportunities for mutually beneficial property improvements. Finally, advising the tenant to proceed without formal written consent from the landlord, even if verbally agreed upon, is a critical ethical and regulatory lapse. Verbal agreements regarding property alterations are often difficult to enforce and can lead to disputes over the scope, quality, and responsibility for the changes, which is contrary to the clear documentation requirements in UAE property transactions. Professional reasoning. Property managers should adopt a systematic approach when faced with tenant modification requests. This involves 1. Understanding the contractual framework lease agreement. 2. Identifying relevant legal provisions, UAE Civil Code concerning property rights and obligations. 3. Communicating transparently with all parties, tenant and landlord. 4. Documenting all requests, approvals, and decisions. 5. Seeking legal counsel if the situation is complex or involves significant structural changes. This structured decision-making process ensures compliance, protects all parties, and upholds professional standards. Question 7. Upon reviewing a residential property in Dubai for a client looking to sell, which valuation method would best inform the client about the property's potential sale price, aligning with current market realities and professional ethical standards in the emirate. Option A. A combination of all three methods without prioritizing current market sales data. Option B. Income approach, by projecting potential rental income and capitalization rates. Option C. Cost approach, by estimating the replacement cost of the property less depreciation. Option D. Comparative market analysis, by examining recent sales of similar properties in the vicinity. The correct answer is D. Comparative market analysis, by examining recent sales of similar properties in the vicinity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a property manager in Dubai must select the most appropriate valuation method to advise a client on a potential sale, ensuring compliance with the Dubai Land Department (DLD) regulations and ethical standards for property professionals. The challenge lies in understanding the nuances of each valuation method and applying them contextually, rather than simply performing a calculation. Accurate valuation is crucial for client trust, successful transactions, and adherence to DLD guidelines, which emphasize transparency and professional conduct. The most appropriate approach for advising a client on a potential sale in Dubai, considering the market dynamics and regulatory environment, is the comparative market analysis. This method is best practice because it directly reflects current market conditions by analyzing recent sales of similar properties in the same or a comparable area. In Dubai, where the real estate market can be dynamic, understanding comparable sales provides the most relevant and actionable insight for a seller. This aligns with the DLD's emphasis on fair market value and transparent dealings, as it is grounded in observable market transactions rather than theoretical costs or future income streams that may be speculative. Ethical practice dictates providing advice based on the most reliable and current market data available. Using the income approach would be professionally inappropriate in this specific scenario for advising on a sale. While valuable for investment properties, it relies heavily on projecting future rental income and vacancy rates, which introduces a degree of speculation. This speculative element can be misleading for a seller focused on immediate market value and may not align with the DLD's preference for tangible market evidence. Furthermore, it does not directly address the current demand and supply forces influencing sale prices as effectively as comparable sales. The cost approach is also professionally unsuitable for advising on a sale of an existing property in Dubai. This method primarily focuses on the cost to replace or reproduce the property, minus depreciation. It is most relevant for new construction or unique properties where comparable sales are scarce. For a standard resale property in Dubai, the cost to build is often significantly different from what the market is willing to pay, making it an unreliable indicator of sale value and potentially misrepresenting the property's true market worth to the seller. This could lead to a failure to meet the DLD's expectation of providing advice based on prevailing market realities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes client interests and regulatory compliance. This involves first understanding the client's objective, selling the property, then assessing the property type and its intended use to determine the most relevant valuation methods. For a sale, the comparative market analysis is typically the primary tool due to its direct reflection of market sentiment and recent transactions. If the property has unique investment potential, the income approach might be a secondary consideration, but not the primary basis for a sale price recommendation. The cost approach is generally reserved for specific circumstances like new builds or unique assets. Always cross-reference findings with DLD guidelines and ethical codes of conduct to ensure advice is both accurate and compliant. Question 8. When evaluating potential rental rate adjustments for a portfolio of properties in Dubai, considering the current market sentiment suggesting a significant upswing, what is the most prudent and ethically sound decision-making framework for a property manager? Option A. Conduct a thorough analysis of historical rental data, current economic indicators, demographic trends, and government development plans in Dubai to forecast future demand and potential risks before proposing any rental adjustments. Option B. Maintain current rental rates and property management strategies without alteration, prioritizing stability and avoiding any potential market fluctuations or tenant dissatisfaction. Option C. Invest a significant portion of available capital into speculative upgrades for properties in newly developing areas of Dubai, anticipating rapid appreciation and increased rental yields. Option D. Immediately implement substantial rent increases across all properties, capitalizing on the perceived market boom to maximize short-term revenue for property owners. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough analysis of historical rental data, current economic indicators, demographic trends, and government development plans in Dubai to forecast future demand and potential risks before proposing any rental adjustments. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a property manager to navigate the inherent volatility of real estate markets while upholding their fiduciary duties to property owners and adhering to the regulatory framework of Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Property managers must balance the desire for optimal returns with the need for responsible and sustainable management practices, avoiding speculative decisions that could jeopardize client assets. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between genuine market opportunities and speculative bubbles, ensuring decisions are grounded in sound analysis and long-term value creation. The best approach involves a comprehensive, data-driven analysis that considers multiple facets of the real estate market within Dubai. This includes examining historical performance, current economic indicators, demographic shifts, government initiatives, and projected future demand. The property manager should consult with relevant market experts and utilize robust forecasting tools to understand the potential risks and rewards associated with different investment or rental strategies. This aligns with the principles of prudent property management as outlined by Dubai's Real Estate Regulatory Agency, RERAG guidelines, which emphasize transparency, due diligence, and acting in the best interest of the client. Such an approach ensures that decisions are informed, ethical, and compliant with the regulatory environment, fostering trust and long-term client relationships. An approach that focuses solely on short-term gains by aggressively increasing rents based on anecdotal evidence of a market upswing is professionally unacceptable. This fails to consider the potential for market correction, which could lead to increased vacancies and tenant dissatisfaction, ultimately harming the property owner's long-term interests. It also disregards the need for a balanced approach to rental pricing, which should reflect market realities and tenant affordability, a principle implicitly supported by RERA's focus on fair market practices. Another unacceptable approach is to adopt a passive strategy and make no adjustments to rental rates or property maintenance, even when market data suggests a clear upward trend. This demonstrates a lack of proactive management and a failure to capitalize on potential opportunities for increased revenue and property value appreciation. While avoiding speculative risks, this approach neglects the fiduciary duty to maximize returns for the property owner within ethical and legal boundaries. Finally, an approach that relies heavily on speculative investments in emerging submarkets without thorough due diligence or understanding of the underlying economic drivers is also professionally unsound. This can expose property owners to significant risk, especially if these submarkets are driven by hype rather than sustainable demand. Such actions could contravene RERA's emphasis on responsible investment and risk management. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the client's objectives and risk tolerance. This should be followed by rigorous market research, incorporating both quantitative data and qualitative insights. Scenario planning, risk assessment, and consultation with legal and financial experts are crucial steps. The final decision should be transparently communicated to the client, with clear justification based on the comprehensive analysis undertaken. Question 9. The analysis reveals that a property owner in Dubai is seeking advice from their property manager regarding the most suitable mortgage type for a new investment property. The owner has a stable income, but is concerned about potential increases in monthly payments. Considering the property manager's duty of care under UAE regulations, which of the following advisory approaches best serves the client's interests? Option A. Propose a mortgage based solely on the lowest advertised interest rate, irrespective of the mortgage type or the owner's financial stability. Option B. Suggest an adjustable rate mortgage, emphasizing the potential for lower initial payments, and assume the owner is comfortable with payment variability. Option C. Advise an interest-only mortgage, highlighting the lower initial monthly payments, without extensively detailing the principal repayment obligations at the end of the loan term. Option D. Recommend a fixed-rate mortgage, explaining that it offers predictable monthly payments, shielding the owner from potential interest rate fluctuations, and ensuring consistent budgeting for their investment property. The correct answer is D. Recommend a fixed-rate mortgage, explaining that it offers predictable monthly payments, shielding the owner from potential interest rate fluctuations, and ensuring consistent budgeting for their investment property. Explanation. The analysis reveals a common scenario in property management in the Emirate of Dubai, where a property manager must advise a client on the most suitable mortgage type for their investment property. This situation is professionally challenging because the choice of mortgage has significant long-term financial implications for the client, and the property manager's advice directly impacts the client's profitability and risk exposure. The property manager must balance the client's immediate financial situation, risk tolerance, and investment goals with the prevailing market conditions and regulatory landscape in Dubai. A thorough understanding of the different mortgage types and their implications under UAE Federal Law No. 26 of 2020, amending certain provisions of the Commercial Companies Law and Dubai Land Department regulations is crucial. The best approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the client's financial capacity, investment horizon, and risk appetite, followed by a recommendation tailored to these factors, clearly outlining the pros and cons of each mortgage type in the context of Dubai's property market. This approach prioritizes the client's best interests and ensures informed decision-making. Specifically, recommending a fixed-rate mortgage when the client has a stable income and prefers predictable expenses, or an adjustable-rate mortgage when the client can tolerate some payment fluctuation and anticipates interest rates falling, demonstrates responsible advisory practice. The property manager must also explain how these mortgage types align with the principles of Islamic finance, which are prevalent in the UAE, if applicable to the client's preferences. An incorrect approach would be to recommend an interest-only mortgage solely based on lower initial payments, without thoroughly explaining the significant principal repayment burden at the end of the term and the associated risks, especially if the client's long-term financial stability is uncertain. This fails to adequately inform the client of the full financial commitment and potential future distress. Another incorrect approach is to recommend an adjustable-rate mortgage to a client with a very low risk tolerance and a fixed income, without adequately explaining the potential for payment increases and the impact on their budget. This disregards the client's stated risk profile and could lead to financial hardship. Recommending a mortgage type without considering the specific economic conditions and interest rate trends in Dubai, or without explaining the implications under relevant UAE laws and regulations, also constitutes a failure in professional duty. Professionals should adopt a client-centric decision-making process. This involves actively listening to the client's needs and concerns, conducting a thorough due diligence of their financial situation and investment objectives, and providing clear, unbiased information about all available options. The property manager should act as a trusted advisor, empowering the client to make an informed decision that aligns with their personal circumstances and the regulatory environment of Dubai. Question 10. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a property manager in Dubai is advising a potential buyer on financing a AED 1,500,000 property. The buyer is eligible for a standard mortgage with a 5% annual interest rate over 25 years, or a government-backed housing loan, hypothetically similar to the Emirates housing loan structure, which offers a subsidized interest rate of 3% for the first 10 years, followed by a market rate of 5% for the remaining 15 years, with a loan term of 25 years. Assuming both loans have no upfront fees for simplicity in this calculation, what is the total interest paid over the life of the government-backed loan compared to the standard mortgage, and what is the percentage difference in total interest paid, rounded to 2 decimal places? Option A. The government-backed loan results in AED 118,955 less total interest paid, representing an 11.25% reduction. Option B. The government-backed loan results in AED 105,210,78 less total interest paid, representing a 9.95% reduction. Option C. The government-backed loan results in AED 130,889,46 less total interest paid, representing a 12.35% reduction. Option D. The government-backed loan results in AED 155,450, 12 less total interest paid, representing a 14.75% reduction. The correct answer is C. The government-backed loan results in AED 130, 889, 46 less total interest paid, representing a 35% reduction. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for property managers in the UAE, specifically when advising potential buyers on financing options for properties that might qualify for government-backed initiatives. The professional challenge lies in accurately calculating the financial implications of different loan types and ensuring that the advice provided is compliant with UAE central bank regulations and the specific terms of any government housing finance programs. Miscalculations or misinterpretations can lead to significant financial detriment for the buyer and reputational damage for the property manager. The need for precise mathematical application and understanding of loan structures is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough calculation of the total repayment amount for each loan type, considering the principal, interest rate, and loan term, and then comparing these total costs against the buyer's projected financial capacity and the property's market value. This approach directly addresses the core financial decision by quantifying the long-term cost of each loan. For government-backed loans in the UAE, such as those facilitated by the Emirates Housing Loan ALE or similar initiatives, the manager must ensure that the calculations align with the specific subsidy structures, interest rate caps, and repayment schedules mandated by the relevant UAE authorities. This meticulous financial due diligence is ethically sound, as it provides the buyer with clear, data-driven information to make an informed decision, minimizing the risk of future financial distress. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the initial monthly payment without considering the total interest paid over the life of the loan. This fails to provide a complete financial picture and can be misleading, as a lower initial payment might mask a significantly higher overall cost due to a longer repayment term or a less favorable interest rate structure once any initial subsidies expire. This is ethically problematic as it prioritizes short-term affordability over long-term financial well-being. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that all government-backed loans offer identical benefits and repayment structures. Each program, even within the UAE, may have unique eligibility criteria, subsidy levels, and interest rate calculations. Failing to investigate and apply the specific terms of the relevant UAE government housing finance program would lead to inaccurate comparisons and potentially unsuitable recommendations. This is a regulatory failure, as it does not adhere to the specific guidelines of the program being considered. A further incorrect approach would be to rely on generalized online loan calculators without verifying their adherence to UAE central bank regulations or the specific parameters of the government-backed loan in question. These calculators may not account for local fees, specific subsidy calculations, or the precise interest accrual methods mandated in the UAE, leading to significant discrepancies in the projected costs. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to comply with local financial regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach that begins with understanding the buyer's financial profile and property goals. This is followed by identifying all potentially applicable loan types, including any government-backed options available in the UAE. For each option, a detailed financial model should be constructed, calculating the total cost of borrowing, including principal, interest, fees, and any applicable subsidies, ensuring all calculations strictly adhere to UAE central bank regulations and the specific terms of the housing finance program. The results should then be presented to the buyer in a clear, comparative format, highlighting the long-term financial implications of each choice. This process ensures informed decision-making, ethical practice, and regulatory compliance. Question 11. Implementation of a new listing agreement for a property in Dubai has led a real estate broker to realize they previously represented the seller of the same property in a prior transaction. A new potential buyer has now expressed strong interest in purchasing the property. What is the most appropriate course of action for the broker to ensure compliance with UAE real estate brokerage regulations? Option A. Continue to represent the buyer exclusively and only disclose the prior relationship if the buyer specifically inquires about the broker's history with the property or seller. Option B. Immediately disclose to the potential buyer that the broker previously represented the seller in a prior transaction, allowing the buyer to decide whether to proceed with the broker's representation. Option C. Inform the buyer that while they previously represented the seller, this prior relationship will not impact their ability to secure the best possible deal for the buyer. Option D. Proceed with facilitating the transaction, assuming the buyer is aware of the broker's prior relationship with the seller, as the property is listed by the brokerage. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose to the potential buyer that the broker previously represented the seller in a prior transaction, allowing the buyer to decide whether to proceed with the broker's representation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a real estate broker to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure compliance with the UAE's stringent real estate brokerage regulations, specifically those governed by the Real Estate Regulatory Agency, RERA, in Dubai. The broker must act with utmost good faith and transparency, prioritizing the interests of their client while adhering to legal and ethical obligations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the desire to secure a deal with the imperative to disclose all material information and avoid any misrepresentation or undisclosed dual agency. The best approach involves the broker proactively identifying the potential conflict of interest arising from their existing relationship with the seller and the new buyer. This approach mandates immediate and full disclosure to both parties about their prior representation of the seller. By informing the buyer of their existing agency relationship with the seller, the broker allows the buyer to make an informed decision about proceeding with the transaction and engaging the broker's services. This aligns directly with RERA emphasis on transparency, fair dealing, and the prohibition of misrepresentation or undisclosed conflicts of interest in brokerage activities. It upholds the ethical duty to avoid situations where the broker's loyalty might be divided or compromised. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the transaction without disclosing the prior relationship with the seller. This failure to disclose constitutes a material omission and a breach of RERA regulations concerning transparency and fair practice. It creates an undisclosed dual agency situation, where the broker's fiduciary duty to the buyer is potentially compromised by their existing obligation to the seller. Such conduct can lead to legal repercussions, including fines and license suspension, and severely damages the broker's professional reputation. Another incorrect approach is to assume the buyer is aware of the broker's relationship with the seller due to the property being listed by the brokerage. This assumption is dangerous and legally unsound. RERA requires explicit disclosure, not implied knowledge. The burden of proof for disclosure rests solely on the broker. Relying on assumptions rather than direct communication is a direct violation of the duty to inform and can be construed as an attempt to mislead. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to prioritize securing the sale over full disclosure, perhaps by downplaying the significance of the prior relationship. This demonstrates a lack of professional integrity and a disregard for regulatory requirements. The broker's primary obligation is to act ethically and legally, which includes ensuring all parties are fully informed of any circumstances that could influence their decision-making. Professionals should adopt a proactive and transparent decision-making process. When a potential conflict of interest arises, the first step is to identify it clearly. Subsequently, all relevant parties must be informed immediately and comprehensively. This disclosure should be documented. The professional should then assess whether they can continue to represent all parties ethically and legally, or if they must withdraw from representing one or more parties. This systematic approach ensures compliance with regulations and maintains professional integrity. Question 12. To address the challenge of a potential buyer in Dubai expressing interest in a property, but indicating they may require private mortgage insurance, PMI, due to a lower down payment, what is the most prudent course of action for a property manager representing the seller? Option A. Recommend to the seller that they discourage the buyer from pursuing PMI, as it represents an additional cost that could make the property less attractive to other potential buyers. Option B. Assume PMI is a standard practice in the UAE and proceed with the transaction without further investigation, as it is a common financial tool. Option C. Advise the seller that PMI is a buyer's financing issue and not directly relevant to the property manager's responsibilities, suggesting they focus solely on the offer price. Option D. Research the specific regulations and common practices of PMI within the UAE real estate market and clearly explain its implications, including costs and benefits for the buyer and how it might affect the property's saleability to the seller. The correct answer is D. Research the specific regulations and common practices of PMI within the UAE real estate market and clearly explain its implications, including costs and benefits for the buyer, and how it might affect the property's saleability to the seller. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a property manager in the UAE to navigate the complexities of private mortgage insurance, PMI, in the context of a specific property transaction. The challenge lies in understanding the implications of PMI for both the buyer and the seller, and how it impacts the overall financial viability and risk profile of the property, especially when dealing with a buyer who may not have the full down payment. Property managers must act as fiduciaries, ensuring transparency and protecting the interests of their clients, often the seller or the property owner, while also facilitating a smooth transaction. Misunderstanding or misrepresenting the role and impact of PMI can lead to significant financial repercussions, legal disputes, and damage to professional reputation. The specific regulatory environment in the UAE, which governs real estate transactions and financial instruments, must be strictly adhered to. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves thoroughly researching and understanding the specific regulations and common practices surrounding PMI within the UAE's real estate market, and then clearly communicating these findings and their implications to the client. This includes explaining what PMI is, who typically pays for it, usually the buyer, its purpose, protecting the lender, and how it affects the buyer's monthly payments and the overall cost of homeownership. Crucially, the property manager must advise the client on how the presence or absence of PMI might influence the attractiveness and saleability of the property, and whether it presents any risks or opportunities for the seller. This approach prioritizes informed decision-making, transparency, and adherence to UAE real estate laws and ethical standards by providing comprehensive, client-centric advice based on a solid understanding of the financial instrument and its local context. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to dismiss PMI as irrelevant to the property manager's role because it directly impacts the buyer's financing rather than the property itself. This fails to recognize that financing terms significantly influence a buyer's ability and willingness to purchase, thereby directly affecting the property's marketability and the seller's prospects. Ignoring this aspect can lead to unrealistic pricing expectations and prolonged listing periods. Another incorrect approach is to assume that PMI is universally understood and accepted in the UAE market without verifying local regulations and practices. This could lead to providing outdated or inaccurate information, potentially misrepresenting the costs and benefits to the client, and failing to comply with any specific disclosure requirements mandated by UAE authorities. A third incorrect approach is to advise the client to discourage buyers from obtaining PMI, viewing it as an unnecessary cost for the buyer. This oversteps the property manager's role by interfering with the buyer's legitimate financing choices and potentially hindering a sale. The property manager's duty is to facilitate a transaction based on market realities, not to dictate financing strategies to potential buyers. Professional reasoning. Professionals in UAE property management should adopt a proactive and informed stance. When encountering financial instruments like PMI, the first step is to identify the specific regulatory framework governing such instruments in the UAE. This involves consulting relevant legislation from entities like the Dubai Land Department, DLD, or Abu Dhabi Department of Municipalities and Transport, DMT, and understanding any guidelines issued by financial regulators. The next step is to assess the impact of this instrument on the property transaction from the client's perspective. This requires understanding how it affects buyer affordability, lender risk, and ultimately, the likelihood in terms of a sale. Professionals must then communicate this impact clearly and objectively to their client, outlining potential advantages and disadvantages. Ethical considerations dictate full transparency and avoiding any actions that could be construed as misrepresentation or undue influence. A robust decision-making process involves continuous learning about market trends and financial products, coupled with a commitment to acting in the best interests of the client within the bounds of UAE law and professional ethics. Question 13. Examination of the data shows that a property manager in the UAE is advising a potential investor on the merits of investing in a real estate investment trust REIT. Considering the regulatory framework for REIT in the UAE, which of the following approaches best represents professional and ethical conduct? Option A. focusing on the ease of entry and the potential for quick returns, without conducting a thorough assessment of the investor's financial situation, risk tolerance, or investment objectives. Option B, providing a comprehensive overview of the rate, including its investment strategy, underlying assets, historical performance, with appropriate disclaimers, distribution policy, liquidity features, and a clear explanation of all associated risks and regulatory disclosures as mandated by the SCA. Option C, emphasizing the potential for significant capital appreciation and rental income, while downplaying or omitting detailed discussion of market volatility and the specific risks tied to the rate underlying properties. Option D, presenting the rate as a fixed income security with guaranteed returns, assuring the investor that their capital and income are protected against market fluctuations. The correct answer is B, providing a comprehensive overview of the rate, including its investment strategy, underlying assets, historical performance, with appropriate disclaimers, distribution policy, liquidity features, and a clear explanation of all associated risks and regulatory disclosures as mandated by the SCA. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent complexities of real estate investment trusts, REIT, and the need to ensure compliance with the specific regulatory framework governing them in the UAE, particularly the SCA, Securities and Commodities Authority, regulations. Property managers acting as advisors or facilitators for potential investors in REIT must navigate disclosure requirements, understand the fiduciary duties involved, and avoid misrepresentation or undue influence. The core challenge lies in balancing the promotion of investment opportunities with the absolute necessity of providing accurate, unbiased information that allows investors to make informed decisions, thereby upholding ethical standards and regulatory compliance. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive and transparent approach to advising potential investors on REIT. This means clearly outlining the investment's nature, its associated risks and potential rewards, and the specific regulatory disclosures mandated by the SCA. It requires the property manager to act as an educator, ensuring the investor fully comprehends the investment structure, the underlying assets, the distribution policies, and the liquidity considerations inherent in REIT. This approach aligns with the SCA's emphasis on investor protection and fair market practices, ensuring that all material information is readily available and understandable. An approach that focuses solely on the potential for capital appreciation, without adequately disclosing the inherent risks of real estate investments and the specific risks associated with the particular rate structure, would be professionally unacceptable. This failure to provide a balanced view constitutes a misrepresentation and violates the ethical duty to act in the investor's best interest. Such an omission could lead to an investor making a decision based on incomplete or misleading information, potentially resulting in financial detriment and regulatory breaches. Another professionally unacceptable approach would be to present the rate as a guaranteed income-generating product. REIT, while often designed for income distribution, are subject to market fluctuations, property performance, and management decisions, none of which can be guaranteed. Presenting them as such is a form of misrepresentation and fails to acknowledge the dynamic nature of real estate investments and the potential for income variability. This directly contravenes the SCA's requirement for accurate and non-misleading information. Finally, an approach that prioritizes securing the investment over the investor's suitability assessment is also professionally unsound. Property managers have an ethical obligation to ensure that the investment aligns with the investor's financial goals, risk tolerance, and investment horizon. Failing to conduct a proper suitability assessment and pushing an investment that is not appropriate for the individual investor is a significant ethical lapse and a potential regulatory violation, as it prioritizes the manager's interests over the investor's well-being. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant UAE regulations concerning rate and financial advisory. This should be followed by a commitment to transparency, accuracy, and suitability. Before offering any advice or facilitating an investment, professionals must ensure they can clearly articulate all aspects of the investment, including risks, and confirm that the proposed investment is appropriate for the specific investor's circumstances. Continuous professional development in understanding evolving market conditions and regulatory updates is also crucial. Question 14. Research into the definition and importance of real estate within the context of the United Arab Emirates property market. A property manager is asked by a new investor to explain these concepts. Which of the following explanations best reflects a comprehensive and legally sound understanding for a client in the UAE? Option A. Real estate is simply any property that can be bought or sold, and its importance is mainly in the profit one can make from quick transactions. Option B. Real estate refers to any item that is not nailed down, and its importance is primarily in its portability and ease of movement for storage. Option C. Real estate is defined as immovable property, encompassing land and any permanent structures attached to it, and its importance lies in its tangible nature as an asset that can generate income, appreciate in value, and serve as collateral, forming a cornerstone of investment and wealth creation. Option D. Real estate is important because it's where people live, and its definition is limited to residential buildings only. The correct answer is C. Real estate is defined as immovable property, encompassing land and any permanent structures attached to it, and its importance lies in its tangible nature as an asset that can generate income, appreciate in value, and serve as collateral, forming a cornerstone of investment and wealth creation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a property manager to navigate the fundamental definition and importance of real estate within the specific legal and ethical framework of the United Arab Emirates, UAE. Misunderstanding or misrepresenting these core concepts can lead to significant legal repercussions, damage to professional reputation, and financial losses for clients. The UAE's property market is governed by specific laws and regulations, and adherence to these is paramount for licensed professionals. The best approach involves clearly articulating the definition of real estate as immovable property, including land and any permanent structures attached to it, and emphasizing its importance as a tangible asset that can generate income, appreciate in value, and serve as collateral. This understanding is crucial for advising clients on investment, leasing, and management strategies. In the UAE, this aligns with the principles of the Real Estate Regulatory Agency, RERA, which mandates transparency and accurate representation of property details and value. A property manager's role is to facilitate transactions and manage assets based on this foundational understanding, ensuring all actions are compliant with UAE property law and ethical standards of practice. An approach that focuses solely on the transactional aspect, without elaborating on the intrinsic value and legal definition of real estate, is insufficient. It fails to educate the client on the underlying asset and its potential, which is a core responsibility of a professional property manager. This oversight could lead to clients making uninformed decisions. Another incorrect approach is to define real estate in a manner that is overly broad or includes personal property. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the legal distinction between real and personal property, which is critical for accurate valuation, taxation, and legal proceedings in the UAE. Such a misdefinition could lead to incorrect advice and potential legal disputes. Furthermore, an approach that neglects to mention the importance of real estate as an investment vehicle and its role in wealth creation is incomplete. Property management extends beyond mere upkeep. It involves strategic advice on maximizing returns and asset growth, which is a key aspect of the importance of real estate. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the UAE's property laws and RERA guidelines. When advising clients, they must first establish a clear, legally sound definition of real estate and then articulate its multifaceted importance, including its investment potential, economic contribution, and legal standing. This ensures that all advice and actions are grounded in accurate knowledge and ethical practice, fostering trust and achieving optimal outcomes for clients. Question 15. Which approach would be most effective for a property manager in Dubai to ensure accurate financial management, including budgeting, reporting, and record keeping, in compliance with UAE regulations and best practices? Option A. Only prepare financial reports when a significant financial discrepancy is identified, to avoid overwhelming the property owner with routine details. Option B. Rely on informal tracking methods using spreadsheets that are updated as time permits and only provide financial summaries when requested by the owner. Option C. Estimate income and expenses to simplify the reporting process, focusing on providing a general overview rather than precise figures. Option D. Develop a detailed annual budget, maintain meticulous records of all income and expenses, and provide regular, comprehensive financial reports to the property owner. The correct answer is D. Develop a detailed annual budget, maintain meticulous records of all income and expenses, and provide regular, comprehensive financial reports to the property owner. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a property manager in Dubai to balance the need for accurate financial reporting with the practicalities of managing multiple properties and diverse tenant payment schedules. The challenge lies in ensuring that financial records are not only compliant with UAE Federal Law No. 18 of 1993 concerning commercial transactions and the Dubai Land Department's regulations, but also provide a clear and reliable picture of the property's financial health to the owner. Mismanagement of budgeting, reporting, and record-keeping can lead to disputes with owners, tenants, and regulatory bodies, potentially resulting in fines and reputational damage. The best approach involves establishing a robust, systematic process for financial management that prioritizes accuracy, transparency, and compliance. This includes developing a detailed annual budget based on historical data and projected expenses, meticulously recording all income and expenditures in a timely manner, and generating regular, comprehensive financial reports for the property owner. This approach ensures adherence to UAE commercial laws that mandate proper record-keeping for all business transactions, and aligns with the Dubai Land Department's emphasis on transparent property management practices. It fosters trust with the owner by providing them with clear insights into their investment's performance and facilitates proactive decision-making. An approach that relies solely on informal tracking methods, such as spreadsheets updated sporadically, fails to meet the stringent record-keeping requirements of UAE commercial law. This lack of systematic documentation makes it difficult to verify transactions, respond to audits, or provide clear financial statements, potentially leading to disputes and regulatory noncompliance. Another unacceptable approach is to only provide financial reports when specifically requested by the owner, without a proactive schedule. This reactive stance can obscure potential financial issues until they become significant problems. It also deviates from best practices in property management, which advocate for regular, transparent communication and reporting to owners, fostering a sense of partnership and enabling timely intervention. Finally, an approach that prioritizes convenience over accuracy, such as estimating expenses or income to simplify reporting, is professionally unsound and legally problematic. UAE commercial law requires accurate recording of all financial activities. Such estimations can lead to discrepancies, misrepresentation of financial performance, and potential legal challenges from owners or regulatory authorities. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific legal and regulatory obligations in Dubai. This involves consulting relevant UAE federal laws and Dubai Land Department guidelines. Subsequently, they should design financial management systems that are not only efficient, but also inherently compliant and transparent. Regular review and updating of these systems, coupled with a commitment to clear and consistent communication with property owners, are crucial for effective and ethical property management. Question 16. Benchmark analysis indicates that a property developer in Dubai is planning a new mixed-use development. The property manager overseeing this project needs to ensure compliance with UAE environmental regulations, which approach best balances regulatory adherence with project viability. Option A. Proceed with the development based on the developer's preliminary environmental assessments, assuming they are sufficient for regulatory purposes. Option B. Minimize environmental impact studies to reduce upfront costs, planning to address any potential environmental issues that arise during or after construction. Option C. Rely on general industry best practices for environmental management without conducting a site-specific assessment for this particular development. Option D. Commission an independent environmental impact assessment (IA) to identify potential risks and propose mitigation strategies aligned with UAE Federal Law No. 24 of 1999, informing the project's design and construction phases. Correct answer is D. Commission an independent environmental impact assessment (IA) to identify potential risks and propose mitigation strategies aligned with UAE Federal Law No. 24 of 1999, informing the project's design and construction phases. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a property manager in the UAE to balance the financial interests of property owners with the imperative to comply with evolving environmental regulations. The potential for significant fines and reputational damage necessitates a proactive and informed approach to environmental impact assessments and mitigation strategies. Failure to do so can lead to legal repercussions and a loss of client trust. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves proactively engaging with environmental consultants to conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, IA, for the proposed development. This assessment should identify potential environmental risks, propose mitigation measures aligned with UAE Federal Law No. 24 of 1999 concerning the protection and development of the environment and its executive regulations, and inform the design and construction phases. This approach ensures that the development adheres to regulatory requirements from the outset, minimizing future compliance issues and potential environmental harm. It demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to sustainable development, which is increasingly valued in the UAE real estate market. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with the development based solely on the developer's initial environmental considerations without independent verification. This fails to meet the due diligence standards mandated by UAE environmental law, which requires thorough assessments to identify and mitigate potential negative impacts. Relying on informal assessments can lead to overlooking critical environmental factors, resulting in non-compliance and potential legal penalties. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize cost savings by deferring or minimizing environmental impact studies, assuming that minor issues can be addressed later. This is a significant regulatory failure. UAE environmental legislation emphasizes a precautionary principle and requires comprehensive assessments before significant environmental changes occur. Postponing these assessments increases the risk of non-compliance, costly remediation, and potential project delays or even cancellation. A further incorrect approach is to assume that standard building practices automatically satisfy environmental regulations without specific verification for the project's unique context. While standard practices may incorporate some environmental considerations, they may not be sufficient to address the specific environmental sensitivities or regulatory nuances of a particular site or development type in the UAE. This lack of specific due diligence can lead to overlooking critical compliance requirements. Professional reasoning. Property managers in the UAE must adopt a risk management framework that integrates environmental compliance into every stage of the property lifecycle. This involves understanding the relevant federal and local environmental laws, such as Federal Law No. 24 of 1999, and seeking expert advice when necessary. A proactive, informed, and documented approach to environmental impact assessment and mitigation is crucial for protecting client interests, ensuring legal compliance, and fostering sustainable real estate development. Question 17. The performance metrics show a consistent trend of longer loan approval times for properties managed within Dubai, impacting potential investor confidence. As a property manager operating under UAE regulations, what is the most prudent approach to expedite the loan underwriting and approval process while ensuring full compliance with RERA and UAE Central Bank guidelines? Option A. Prioritize loan applications based on the perceived urgency of the borrower, accepting verbal assurances of financial stability for faster processing. Option B. Implement a standardized pre-screening checklist for all loan applications to verify borrower financial capacity and property valuation against regulatory benchmarks before formal submission. Option C. Expedite approvals by bypassing the requirement for independent property appraisals and accepting the borrower's estimated property value. Option D. Rely on the borrower's provided financial statements and property valuations without independent verification, assuming their accuracy for expediency. The correct answer is B. Implement a standardized pre-screening checklist for all loan applications to verify borrower financial capacity and property valuation against regulatory benchmarks before formal submission. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a property manager to balance the financial interests of the property owner with the regulatory obligations and ethical considerations surrounding loan underwriting and approval in the UAE. The pressure to secure financing quickly can lead to overlooking critical due diligence, potentially exposing the owner to undue risk and violating regulatory guidelines. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance and protect all parties involved. The best approach involves a thorough review of the loan application and supporting documentation, verifying the borrower's financial capacity and the property's valuation against established UAE central bank regulations and RERAG guidelines for property financing. This includes scrutinizing income sources, credit history, and ensuring the loan-to-value ratio is within permissible limits. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the UAE Central Bank's prudential regulations and RERAG mandate to ensure fair and transparent property transactions, thereby protecting investors and maintaining market stability. It prioritizes due diligence and risk mitigation, which are fundamental to responsible loan underwriting. An approach that involves accepting the borrower's self-reported financial statements without independent verification is professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct due diligence violates the principles of prudent lending and could contravene UAE central bank directives on Know Your Customer (KIC) and anti-money laundering (AML) requirements, which mandate verification of borrower information. Another unacceptable approach is to approve the loan based solely on the borrower's urgency and a verbal assurance of repayment, without a formal assessment of their financial standing or the property's market value. This disregards the established underwriting process and exposes the owner to significant default risk, potentially leading to financial losses and reputational damage. It also fails to adhere to the principles of sound financial management and risk assessment expected of property managers under UAE law. Furthermore, approving a loan based on a valuation provided by an unverified or unqualified appraiser is also professionally unsound. This bypasses the requirement for independent and credible property valuations, which are crucial for determining the collateral's adequacy and ensuring compliance with loan-to-value ratios stipulated by the UAE Central Bank. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance, ethical conduct, and robust risk management. This involves establishing clear internal policies and procedures for loan underwriting, conducting comprehensive due diligence on all applicants and properties, seeking independent professional advice when necessary, and maintaining detailed records of all decisions and justifications. The focus should always be on making informed decisions that protect the owner's interests while adhering strictly to the legal and regulatory framework governing property financing in the UAE. Question 18. The control framework reveals that a property manager in Dubai is assisting a client with a mortgage application for a property purchase. Considering the regulatory environment of the United Arab Emirates, which of the following actions best represent the property manager's role in facilitating this process? Option A. Submit an incomplete mortgage application to the financial institution, assuming the bank will follow up for any missing information. Option B. Proactively gather all necessary property and client documentation, ensuring accuracy and completeness before submitting the mortgage application to the chosen financial institution. Option C. Provide only basic property details to the financial institution and rely on the bank to conduct all independent property due diligence. Option D. Advise the client to apply to multiple financial institutions concurrently without a coordinated strategy. The correct answer is B. Proactively gather all necessary property and client documentation, ensuring accuracy and completeness before submitting the mortgage application to the chosen financial institution. Explanation. The control framework reveals a common challenge in property management within the UAE, navigating the mortgage application process for a client while ensuring compliance with the specific regulations governing financial transactions and property ownership. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a property manager to act as an intermediary and facilitator, demanding a thorough understanding of both property law and the intricacies of mortgage origination in the Emirates. Missteps can lead to significant legal repercussions, financial penalties for the client and the manager, and damage to professional reputation. Careful judgment is required to balance client interests with regulatory adherence. The best professional practice involves proactively gathering all necessary documentation from the client and the property itself, and then submitting a complete and accurate mortgage application to the chosen financial institution. This approach ensures that the application is processed efficiently and without undue delay, minimizing the risk of rejection due to incomplete or incorrect information. This aligns with the UAE Central Bank regulations and the guidelines set by the Dubai Land Department, DLD, or relevant Emirate authority, which emphasize transparency, accuracy, and timely submission of all required documents for property-related financial transactions. It demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to facilitating a smooth transaction for the client. Submitting an incomplete application with the expectation that the bank will chase the missing information is professionally unacceptable. This approach fails to meet the regulatory expectation of providing a comprehensive submission from the outset. It can lead to significant delays, increased costs for the client due to extended processing times, and potentially a negative impact on the client's creditworthiness. Ethically, it shows a lack of preparedness and a disregard for the client's financial well-being and the efficiency of the banking process. Providing only partial property details and relying on the bank to conduct its own extensive due diligence on the property is also professionally unacceptable. While banks do conduct their own checks, the property manager has a duty to present the property accurately and completely. Failing to do so can be seen as misrepresentation or negligence, potentially violating DLD regulations concerning the provision of accurate property information. This approach shifts an undue burden onto the financial institution and could lead to issues if the bank's independent checks uncover discrepancies that could have been preempted by the property manager. Suggesting the client approach multiple banks simultaneously without a clear strategy or understanding of their specific requirements is professionally unacceptable. This scattergun approach can lead to multiple credit checks on the client, negatively impacting their credit score, and can overwhelm the client with varying information and processes. It also demonstrates a lack of understanding of the mortgage application process and the importance of a targeted and informed approach, which is crucial for navigating the UAE's financial regulatory landscape effectively. Question 19. Strategic planning requires a property manager in Dubai to carefully consider tenant requests. A tenant in a residential property managed by your firm, governed by a standard Dubai lease agreement, has requested permission to sublet their apartment for a period of 6 months due to a temporary work assignment abroad. The current lease agreement does not contain an explicit clause prohibiting subletting. What is the most appropriate course of action for the property manager to take? Option A. Immediately approve the sublet request as the lease agreement does not explicitly prohibit subletting. Option B. Advise the tenant to proceed with subletting and inform the landlord only after the arrangement is finalized. Option C. Obtain written consent from the landlord and ensure any subletting arrangement adheres to the terms of the original lease and any landlord-stipulated conditions. Option D. Inform the tenant that subletting is permissible without further investigation, as there is no specific clause against it in the lease. The correct answer is C. Obtain written consent from the landlord and ensure any subletting arrangement adheres to the terms of the original lease and any landlord-stipulated conditions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent complexities of lease agreements, particularly when dealing with a tenant seeking to sublet a property in Dubai. Property managers must navigate the specific legal framework governing tenancies in the Emirate, balancing the landlord's rights and interests with the tenant's obligations and the legal provisions for subletting. Failure to adhere to the correct procedures can lead to legal disputes, financial penalties, and damage to the property manager's reputation and the landlord's investment. The key challenge lies in understanding the nuances of the Dubai tenancy law and its implications for subletting clauses within lease agreements. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough review of the existing lease agreement and a direct consultation with the landlord to ascertain their explicit consent for subletting. This approach aligns with the principles of good property management and the regulatory requirements in Dubai. Specifically, Article 27 of the Dubai Tenancy Law, Law No. 26 of 2007, as amended by Law No. 33 of 2008, generally prohibits subletting without the landlord's written consent. Therefore, obtaining this consent, documented in writing, is paramount. The property manager must then ensure that any subletting arrangement complies with the terms of the original lease and any specific conditions stipulated by the landlord, and that the new subtenant is properly vetted. This proactive and consent-driven approach safeguards all parties and ensures compliance with Dubai's real estate regulations. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately approving the sublet request based solely on the tenant's assertion that the lease agreement does not explicitly prohibit it. It fails to acknowledge the default legal position under Dubai law, which generally requires landlord consent for subletting, even if not explicitly forbidden. It bypasses the landlord's fundamental right to control who occupies their property and exposes the landlord to potential risks associated with an unapproved subtenant. Another incorrect approach is to inform the tenant that subletting is permissible without further investigation or landlord consultation, citing a lack of a specific clause against it in the original lease. This demonstrates a superficial understanding of the law and contractual obligations. It ignores the overarching legal framework that governs tenancies in Dubai and the landlord's ultimate authority. A third incorrect approach is to advise the tenant to proceed with subletting and to inform the landlord only after the arrangement is finalized. This is ethically unsound and legally precarious. It undermines transparency, erodes trust between the landlord and the property manager, and directly contravenes the requirement for landlord consent prior to subletting, potentially leading to breach of contract and legal repercussions for all parties involved. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach when faced with tenant requests that involve modifications to the lease agreement or property use. This involves 1. Understanding the governing legislation, in this case, Dubai tenancy law. 2. Scrutinizing the existing lease agreement for relevant clauses. 3. Prioritizing communication and obtaining explicit consent from the property owner. 4. Ensuring any subsequent arrangements are documented and compliant with both the lease and applicable laws. This structured process minimizes risk and upholds professional standards. Question 20. The efficiency study reveals that a foreign investor is considering acquiring a 99-year leasehold interest in a commercial property in a designated freehold area in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. The initial lease premium is AED 5,000,000. The projected annual net rental income, after deducting all operating expenses and service charges, is ED 400,000. The investor's required rate of return is 8% per annum, assuming the leasehold is treated as a perpetual income stream for calculation purposes, though legally limited to 99 years. What is the most appropriate method to assess the financial viability of this investment, and what would be the approximate net present value, NPV, if the lease term was considered infinite for this specific calculation? Option A. Calculate the net present value, NPV, by discounting the annual net rental income at the required rate of return and subtracting the initial lease premium. For an infinite term, the NPV would be approximately AED 0, as the present value of the income stream equals the initial investment. Option B. Sum the total projected net rental income over the 99-year lease term, 99 years asterisk AED 400,000/year equals AED 39,600,000, and subtract the initial lease premium ED 5,000,000, resulting in a total profit of AED 34,600,000. Option C. Calculate the simple annual yield by dividing the annual net rental income, ED 400,000, by the initial lease premium, ED 5,000,000, resulting in an 8% yield, and consider this sufficient for viability. Option D. Calculate the total potential resale value at the end of the 99-year lease by assuming the property value remains constant and adding this to the total rental income, then subtracting the initial lease premium. The correct answer is A. Calculate the net present value, NPV, by discounting the annual net rental income at the required rate of return and subtracting the initial lease premium. For an infinite term, the NPV would be approximately AED 0, as the present value of the income stream equals the initial investment. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a need to accurately assess the financial implications of different property ownership structures for a new development in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. This scenario is professionally challenging because property ownership in the UAE, particularly for foreign investors, is governed by specific laws that dictate rights, responsibilities, and transferability. Misunderstanding these structures can lead to significant financial losses, legal disputes, and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with Dubai Land Department (DLD) regulations and to provide clients with sound financial advice. The correct approach involves calculating the net present value, NPV, of the expected rental income over the lease term, factoring in the initial lease premium and any anticipated service charges or maintenance costs, and comparing this to the upfront cost of acquiring the leasehold. This method accurately reflects the long-term financial benefit and cost associated with a leasehold interest, which is a common form of ownership for foreign investors in designated freehold areas in Dubai. The justification lies in the nature of leasehold, where ownership is for a defined period, and the financial returns are derived from the use and potential subletting of the property over that term, minus the costs incurred. This aligns with the principles of investment appraisal and the legal framework governing leasehold properties in Dubai, which grants rights for a specific duration. An incorrect approach would be to simply sum the total expected rental income over the lease term without discounting it to its present value and without accounting for the initial lease premium. This fails to acknowledge the time value of money, a fundamental financial concept, and ignores the significant upfront capital outlay required for the leasehold. Ethically and professionally, this would lead to an overestimation of profitability and potentially poor investment decisions. Another incorrect approach would be to treat the leasehold as if it were fee-simple ownership and calculate the total potential resale value at the end of the lease term without considering the residual value limitations inherent in a leasehold. Fee-simple ownership implies outright ownership with no time limit, which is fundamentally different from a leasehold. This mischaracterization would lead to an inaccurate financial projection and a misunderstanding of the rights and limitations of the investor. A further incorrect approach would be to calculate the annual rental income and divide it by the initial lease premium to determine a simple yield, ignoring the duration of the lease and any associated costs. A yield is a component of investment analysis. This simplified calculation omits crucial factors like the time value of money and the total cost of ownership over the lease period, leading to a misleading assessment of the investment's true financial performance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the specific ownership structure as defined by UAE law, particularly Dubai Land Department regulations. This should be followed by a comprehensive financial analysis that utilizes appropriate valuation methods, such as NPV, to accurately assess the profitability and risks associated with the investment. Transparency and clear communication of assumptions and methodologies to clients are paramount.